Barney was my favorite show when I was a young child. I liked the atmosphere, the dialogue, and pretty much everything about it. And that was before this episode aired. I had been around 6 years old and was sitting on my couch, playing with a piece of Play-Doh, waiting for Barney and Friends to come on the television. Beforehand, I had turned it on and clicked to the channel that normally played the episode. And, just as I expected, Sesame Street had just ended, and it was showing what the episode of Barney that was about to come on was about. It was an episode I had never seen before, with two new children named Myra and Billy. The credits to Sesame Street had finally ended, and the episode of Barney began. The thing that should have struck me as odd in the first place, but didn't, was that there was no music in the opening credits. Just the sound of howling winds. The clip that usually played during the credits weren't even there. Instead, there was what looked like transparent plastic cling wrap over them. I could see the silhouettes of two people, presumably adults. They were pushing each other around. The sound was very muffled, but I could hear the faint sound of one of them screaming. He was screaming, "Stop it! You're hurting me!" And then I heard the sound of a chainsaw. Blood splattered the transparent sheet of plastic that covered the camera, and within a moment the whole screen was nothing more but a crimson red. I could still see the silhouettes of the two strange people that were fighting, except one of them had been impaled on what looked to be a chainsaw. Then, the actual episode began. I don't really think you could really call it much of an episode. I mean, don't get me wrong, I could see Barney, but half of the screen was covered by green pixels and a video of a guy staring at a camera. I can't really remember the details of the next few minutes of the episode that well, but I can vaguely remember the guy coming closer to the camera, only to reveal that he wasn't actually coming towards the camera. A man had cut a hole in his back and had his arms stuck in it, like a fucking ventriloquist puppet. The next scene in the episode was Barney and the two children described in the promo before the episode, standing hand in hand, dressed in black. The camera kept zooming in on them, and they were saying, "Come closer, come closer. We'd like to take you along for our adventures." Over and over again in monotone voices. I came a little bit closer to the screen and I was met with something horrible. My own mother's face, half of the skin hanging off, stared back at me through the screen. Half of the skin hanging off, staring back at me through the screen of her Magnavox television. Spiders of various sizes and shapes crawled in and out of her mouth, and her eyes were dripping blood. With every second that damned episode stayed on the screen. After 3 minutes and about 3 gallons of liquid shit in my bright red play pants, I finally worked up the nerve to turn the television off. It's funny, because the actual episode, the actual television itself, apparently wound up screwing up in some way and burst into flames. Boy, did that scare the fuck out of me when I was younger. It's funny how I even remember that moment, given the fact that the fumes cut off my air supply. The flames actually managed to engulf a good portion around me, till I wound up passing out, waking up in the hospital the very next day. Even as I currently speak, after 7 years, 7 long fucking years of intense therapy that I've had to go through, I've never been able to get the content of that episode out of my head. It's very unlikely It's very unlikely that I'll ever get that shit out of my head. Given the fact that that show had shaped my childhood, terrifying the shit out of me. And definitely completely and utterly fucked with whatever innocence I may have had left. It did all of that and more. It did all of that. It did all of that. It did all of that and so much more. I just wanted to stop. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop. I wanted to stop. I just wanted to stop. Now, normally I would provide some level of a theory in order to try and somewhat explain the levels of absolute insanity that the story tried and provided. However, I really couldn't honestly think of one. At least, however, until I actually reread this ungodly level of abominable plate of words in front of me, and I did manage to come up with at least one plausible theory that could potentially explain the whole thing, thus more or less kind of somewhat maybe giving it an increment of possible believability. And that specific thing is that it is a false memory. A memory that the author or someone along those lines, or in this case the protagonist, somehow managed to come up with their mind due to some level of God only knows what during this person's time in therapy, or because of a random memory that may have came across. Now, of course, like I've said before in the review, while this may not be particularly scary for somebody, say of our age, it definitely is something that genuinely could have freaked out a person, as, well, specifically scaring somebody given the fact that they were younger. And I could potentially see this being the case of it being a false memory. I mean, let's be honest here. It wouldn't surprise me if it was a false memory, given the fact that much of the stuff is completely blown over the top. I mean, the chainsaws, blood, everything like such being thrown into it. Very likely was increments of various other memories that the protagonist's childhood probably wind up figuring out, or probably wind up remembering and incorporated into the actual fever dream itself. But honest to God, that's really the only thing I can logically come up with this story. And even then, that's kind of a bit of a, how do I put this? It's kind of a generous thing, because honestly, if I really had to make a decision, I wouldn't even bother incorporating a theory. Because honestly, there really isn't much of any kind of theory except for the one I just came up with. But I'd like to hear if you guys have any potential theories on why this could possibly actually be legitimate. But very likely there aren't going to be very many. But I'd really like to hear what you all have to think about. Well, actually, what you all have to say. Now, in relations to my final thoughts of this story, hence the reason why the two are combined together in this video, which I will try and not do as frequently, my final thoughts on the story is that this honest-to-God creepypasta, quote-unquote, is really nothing else more than the bottom barrel of any level cartoon creepypasta. It's not really that much of a surprise to me, given the fact that a majority of lost episode pastas out there that are created by either a bunch of 9-year-olds in their mother's basement that don't know shit about writing a story, or they're actually written by people who more or less want to attempt to try and troll just to piss people off. Regardless, though, the story itself lacked anything even remotely good. It lacked everything good. There was nothing about the story that was even remotely interesting. There was nothing about it that actually scared anyone. And hell, I'll even go so far to even say that even my own narration of the story didn't even bother doing any legitimate justice to this. If anything, if you think about it, the reaction and everything coming from it just pretty much came across as being nothing more than a complete overreaction. Which, really looking back at it now, since I did the narration yesterday, I kind of see, and now I'm quite sure this is going to be one of those videos that's likely going to follow me for the rest of my life. Overall, the story itself honestly could have been something decent, but then again, that's what I say with many of these lost episode pastas. There could have actually been something decent thrown into this, had this individual actually wind up putting a lot more time and effort into the story itself. But again, like with most of these stories, very few people even do. They sit there and just basically slam their head repeatedly on the keyboard, hoping to get something that's somewhat even remotely interesting, and then proceed to upload it to another god-awful rotten Wikia site, because of the fact that the official site doesn't even cater to those stories anymore, and to be frank, I don't blame them. Overall, the story was lackluster. It failed in many ways. It didn't provide anything except for one increment of a realistic reaction, but that is close to about it. Nothing more, nothing less. That's all I can say. Only way you can even remotely improve this thing of a story is by completely and utterly overhauling it and redoing it. Which is something that I didn't think I'd ever have to go out of my way and say again, given the fact that I've sworn off these god-awful abominations that we call stories. but this is the exception rather than the rule. But regardless though, what did you all potentially think of this story? Actually, scratch that part. What I meant to say was, this is only my own personal opinion. I know I am coming off as a bit harsh on this one, but when you have stories like these that don't even bother putting effort, you're gonna need to be very, very critical. I am also encouraging everyone out there to please do not harass the original author, do not harass anyone who made the story. If anything, take this as an opportunity to learn how not to write a creepypasta and incorporate it into your writing and or your lives if you can. And again, like I've said before, this is only my own opinion. That's all that this is. It's simply my own personal opinion. Mine and mine alone. And everyone else is entitled to what they think about this. If you honestly think this story is good, let me know. I would like to hear your thoughts and your reasons why you think it's good. If you think this story is bad, which I'm sure a lot of people probably do, I'd like to hear your reasons as to why. And if for some reason I happen to miss anything, a potential possible theory, or anything that I may have missed in the actual review itself that really should have been looked into, I would really like to know, and I really would like to hear your own level of constructive criticism down in the comments section below. With that said, thanks again for watching today's episode, you guys. If you are brand new here to this YouTube channel, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, or dislike if you don't happen to enjoy it. Let me know. It helps out the channel a lot. And of course, like always, roll the outro because I'm out.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.